Thus far in the course, we've talked about sustainability without actually defining what we mean by sustainability. So in this lesson, we're going to correct that to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. It turns out there might be more to it than we had in mind. Let's get started. If you go to the dictionary, you'll find a couple of different definitions for sustainability that all mean more or less the same thing. For instance, the Cambridge Dictionary states that sustainability is the quality of being able to continue over a period of time. For example, as the long-term sustainability of a company. The Oxford Dictionary defines sustainability as the ability to be maintained at a certain rate or level, suggesting that something is sustainable if it keeps going into the future as it is today. There are also definitions based on more context. For example, dictionary.com has a definition related to the environment, the quality of not being harmful to the environment or depleting natural resources, and therefore supporting long-term ecological balance. Okay, that's a lot more specific, and probably what we really mean when we talk about sustainability in the context of this course. But all the definitions mean similar things: the ability for something to keep going at a certain level. For the environment, that means the forest will continue to thrive for hundreds of years into the future. For businesses, that means they'll be around for decades into the future. Hopefully, that clears up a few things when we talk about sustainability, but there's an even better, far more useful definition. When we talk about sustainability, most of the time we're really talking about sustainable development, meaning our ability to thrive and grow economically within the constraints of the planet, while making sure everyone has the same opportunity to do so as well. The phrase sustainable development was made popular back in 1987 in a report drafted by the United Nations World Commission on Environment and Development, or the WCED. The goal of the commission was to think about ways to grow both economically, that's the development part, without further degradation of the environment. And not just growth of the wealthy nations, but growth of poor countries as well, as that was how they were going to get themselves out of such poverty. The group was chaired by Gro Harlem Brundtland, then Prime Minister of Norway. Prime Minister Brundtland had an environmental background and was considered one of the few leaders in the world that truly appreciated the scope of the challenge. The result of their work was called Our Common Future, where sustainable development was defined for one of the first times in such a public document. The Commission stated that sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This rather simple-sounding statement packs a lot into it. For one, it brings up the idea of needs. Now, one person's needs could be another person's wants, so we need to be aware of that. But a significant part of the report was aimed at reducing poverty across the globe, and that meant meeting the essential needs of the world's poor, such as access to food, water, housing, and education, to name but a few. But it also acknowledged economic growth of industrialized nations, whose population might see their needs a bit differently. In all cases, though, the report made it clear that meeting all these needs meant pressure on the planet, and that there is an environmental limit that one cannot go past without irreparable harm. It also means, in order for future generations to meet their own needs, we can't exceed these environmental limits. One last comment about our common future. Elsewhere in the report, the definition includes the word aspirations, such as meet the needs and aspirations of the present without compromising the ability to meet those of the future. We rarely, if ever, hear the word aspirations when we talk about sustainable development today. And it's too bad that we don't, as it includes that we just don't have needs, essential or otherwise, but we have dreams of what we can achieve if we put our collective minds to it. But let's think about this for a minute. If sustainability is maintaining the current level of something over time, is this really what we should be aiming for right now? Imagine a plot of environmental health versus time, perhaps from the 1750s at the start of the Industrial Revolution, to today. If we were to think of environmental health in terms of factors such as climate change, sea level rise, ocean acidification, plastic pollution, chemical pollution, air pollution, or even biodiversity loss, then we might plot a curve that looks something like this. We've been in a degenerative state, making things a lot worse these last few hundred years. Now let's be sustainable. But wait, that means we maintain the level of environmental degradation we have today, well into the future. And why would we want to maintain where we are today? Why would we want to sustain this? Let's think about what we really want to do. Certainly we want to be sustainable, but not yet. The first thing we need to do is to get back to where we were, some point where the health of the environment was in much better shape. How do we do that? We allow time for our environment to regenerate on its own, and we work to restore it to a level where we can all thrive. So these new terms, regenerate and restore, represent important first steps. Once the health of the environment is in good shape, then we can sustain that well into the future. For instance, as we'll discuss in our next module, we need to be completely off fossil fuels by 2050 in order to keep the planet from warming more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's not fully back to where we were in 1750, but it's as close as we can get based on where we are today. Once we can produce all the energy we need without greenhouse gas emissions, we can really talk about environmental, social, and economic balance in a much more sustainable way. So in reality, before we can talk a lot about sustainability, we need to get back to something that looks a lot more like this, at least from an environmental perspective. And this is something worth keeping around for future generations.